I'm NihongoGamer, and we're looking today at this, the 8BitDo M30 controller, and if it looks familiar to you, of course, it does look a lot like the old Sega Mega Drive controller, also known as the Sega Genesis controller, and if it looks really familiar to you, you'll remember that I've actually looked at this controller before. Full disclaimer, both of these controllers were sent to me by the manufacturer, but they didn't ask me to say anything specific about it. I get to keep them at the end of the video, and all opinions are, of course, my own. Alright, it's time to check out the 8BitDo M30 and Mini. I'm just going to be using the bog standard Bluetooth edition, the M30. This is going to be the most popular one. Right, left, down, I've got my jump, and I can press all of my buttons. And the thing that I think you're going to notice with the 8BitDo M30 the most is that you're gonna love this controller the first time you pick it up. I can do my fireballs, I can do dragon punches, but this is just me using the controller like a normal controller. Now, one of the main things about the 8BitDo M30 is that it's got a 6-button layout, so instead of using it with my thumbs like this, I can actually hold my hand over like this and use it like a small arcade stick. So realistically speaking, what you're going to end up doing in hand over mode is you're going to rest it on your leg or jab it into the side of your leg like this, and then you're just going to be using these 3 fingers, and then maybe sometimes you'll be using your thumb as well. And for example, when you're in Street Fighter, you might be using these 2 buttons here to do a throw. That's really common. What also is common though in Street Fighter 6 especially is using a combination of these buttons. Using these 2 buttons in the middle at the same time, this is a parry or a drive rush, and if you press Z and C at the same time, which are actually R1 and R2, then you can do a drive impact, and those are really important features of this game. For just general movement like this, it actually feels really nice. So if I just jump in and do a few moves, you have a lot of the benefit of having a 6-button layout. It's just really intuitive, especially if you originally played on arcade stick and you just want to get into playing on pad. Honestly, I love the feel of these buttons. They're just standard membrane switches on these buttons. They're not like keyboard switches, they're not clicky or anything, but personally, and I've said this many times in previous videos, that I actually really prefer to have membrane buttons for the action buttons over here. They also have shoulder buttons on this controller, and L is set to L1 and R is actually set to L2. But immediately, I think you could probably already see this is not going to be very useful when you're using it in hand over mode, because now I don't have access to this button unless I reach over and tap it like this. And now you're getting into claw grip territory, and I'm not going to start anything like that. Which means that in total, what you have access to is 6 buttons on the front and 1 button here on the left, because there is no L2 button over here. What that means in practice is that in a game like Street Fighter, where you really want quick access to drive impact and also to drive rush, which is your parry button, and if you press it forward at the same time, you get drive rush. You really want to have quick access to those 2 things without having to press 2 buttons at the same time. Now that I don't have access to the R button, in order to do my parry, I actually have to press Y and B at the same time. It's just not very fast to go from like pressing the tip of my finger for a button and then flattening out to press like this. Maybe on a big, large arcade stick with 30mm buttons, it's possible, but on something small like this, you can see it's kind of weird for my finger. That being said, if you're playing a game that isn't Street Fighter 6 and it doesn't require any of these 2-button combinations like this, then actually having quick access to these 6 buttons like this is perfectly fine. Should also mention that it's not the most comfortable controller to use on your lap. When you're using your hand over like this for fighting games, you're often going to be searching for the ideal way to prevent it from shifting around. So you either jab it into your leg like this, or you rest it on top of your leg like this. And because the controller is so light, it just slides around. My pinky and my thumb holding it in place, and then I'm using these 3 fingers to do the commands. How does the D-pad feel? On your M30, when you first get it, you're going to be like, hey, wait a minute. This is a brilliant design of D-pad, and maybe every controller should have this. This is kind of the design that was used on the Mega Drive. You can see it's got a concave shape, which is really nice because it means that you can go from left to right without having to push down in the middle to go left and right, and you're never really losing contact with the D-pad, and that's really, really nice, and I much prefer this concave shape to D-pads that are completely flat. The other thing you should know is that it does have a pivot on the inside. Now, on some controllers that don't have a pivot, if you're holding down back and then you do a flash kick or you do a sonic boom, you'll press the button like this and nothing will come out, because technically you're still holding back. Even though you've pressed forward, you haven't released the back direction. Now, on the 8BitDo M30, it does release the back direction because there's a pivot, and the pivot prevents you from pressing both left and right at the same time. And the second thing that is really important with a D-pad, which I test on pretty much every controller, is do you get accidental jumps? And look at this. I'm going back and forth, no issue, and honestly, not getting any accidental jumps. And so I think it helps maybe that this D-pad is nice and big. It separates physically the distance from this button to this button. You're rarely going to press both at the same time and get an accidental jump towards your enemy. So in all honesty, at this point, if you're wondering whether it's good for fighting games, it's already passed pretty much every test that I like to do on a controller like this, and it's just like, wait a minute, this design is genius. Maybe we should all still be using Sega Mega Drive designed controllers on our modern consoles for fighting games. However, there is one thing that slightly is a little bit frustrating. I should be able to press down forward, maybe I'm pressing some kind of command normal, and then I'm going to roll into a Tatsumaki like this, and you're going to see the Tatsumaki's not going to come out. You see the down forward, and then there's no down input, which means when I'm going from down forward, rolling back like this, it's not going down forward, down, down, back, back. It's actually just going down forward, skipping down, down back, back. And this can be really frustrating when you're in the middle of a match and you're just like, I need to do some kind of command normal into my Tatsumaki, and unfortunately the Tatsumaki just doesn't come out. Now, if you're really careful, you could be like, okay, I'm just going to modify my style and just be really, really careful that I do my inputs nice and slow so that it always comes out. But as you can see, even though I did it nice and slowly just there, unfortunately, I still skipped down. Here, in general, on this D-pad, the thing that you might not expect is how gummy it feels. Now, that's not really a deal breaker. I don't know exactly what it was like on the original Mega Drive, but compared to a lot of D-pads that are out there now, this is like the opposite of clickiness. Because it's kind of mushy, it also means that it's very, very easy to press. Like, there's no pressure, like practically no pressure required to press these buttons. So you're gonna have very little fatigue when you've been playing with this controller for a long period of time. So just know that you don't have that reassuring feeling of, I've done exactly 3 clicks on the D-pad, so I know that I've done the command right. There really is no need for these buttons to be so small. Yes, on an original Sega Mega Drive pad, that was how they were designed, and I think it's because, you know, most games only needed A, B, and C, and then you could also, you know, feel for these extra buttons that were added in. Honestly, not that many games I can remember actually needed the XYZ buttons. However, I think for fighting games, you're gonna have your hand over the top like this, and really just aiming for these tinier buttons instead of these larger buttons, there's no need for it, and I just do feel like it just makes it harder to do combos, especially in other games that are not Street Fighter. I'm pressing A, B, C, sometimes D, and it's just like, wait, why are the buttons a different size? And so that takes me to what I think would make this controller absolutely perfect for me, because I think a lot of people have discovered this a long time ago, that the D-pad on the original Mega Drive was kind of brilliant for fighting games. But there are things that need to be ironed out. First of all, the D-pad does need to get rid of that neutral down issue when you're going from crouching forward to crouching back. If you roll too quickly, it just skips the down input entirely. But going on from that, to make the controller absolutely perfect for me, I would love to have larger buttons here on the top. So all 6 of these buttons, the same shape and size. But then in addition to that, I really, really, really think we need an L2 button. We don't even need an R2 button. I'd be happy if there was nothing on the right side at all. If I've got my right hand over the controller like this, I don't have time to be jumping over and pressing this button here. What I want is 6 buttons on the front and 2 buttons at least over here. 1 for drive impact and 1 for drive rush. And then if they want to go even further and make it even better, it would be nice if there were some back buttons. 8BitDo has an arcade stick, which they make specifically for people who want to play retro games or fighting games, but I've never seen 8BitDo talk about making a dedicated fight Fightpad. And with the explosion of popularity of Street Fighter 6, I know there's a new Mortal Kombat game coming out as well. There's a new Tekken game coming out. In fact, EVO is this week. There's so much stuff that's going to be announced. There's a League of Legends fighting game. It's just insane. This would be the perfect time for 8BitDo to look at what they've got, which is already not bad at all, and go, we could turn this into a dedicated fight pad with just one extra button here underneath L1. If we had an L2 button, and then if we sorted out the D-pad and we made these buttons here on the top a little bit bigger, this would be... I get excited just thinking about it. So anyway, that is basically it for the 8BitDo M30. Remember, if you have a Sega Mega Drive Mini and specifically want a controller for that, then you want to go for this version, which has a dongle which you can plug straight into it. But for most people, you're gonna want to go for this one. It's the Bluetooth edition of the M30. If they made changes to it to just turn it into a proper fight pad and just forgot about the Sega shape and size and just said, look, we'll make whatever design is best to make it great for fighting games, it would just be amazing. Subscribe if you loved the video, like it if you haven't done so already, and leave a comment down below. What do you think would make the M30 even better for fighting games? That's all I've got time for today. I've been NihongoGamer. I'll see you real soon.